Football is a game that's always evolving, and new rules and regulations are brought in almost every year. But did you know that back in 1863, when the Football Association published the original laws of football for the first time ever, the goal had no crossbar? Yep, that's pretty crazy. And in this episode, we're gonna go through some of the most interesting rules from way back in the days and see how they've changed throughout the years. As mentioned, with the OG 1863 rules, the game we all loved looked and was played way differently. The maximum length of the pitch was 200 yards and the maximum breadth 100 yards. And to put this in perspective, the FC Barcelona home pitch Camp Nou is about 115 times 74 yards. And when you look at these two side by side with the 1863 dimensions, yeah, there's quite a big difference. Also, every time a goal was scored, the teams would switch ends, and the throw-in was awarded to the first player to touch the ball after it went out of play, regardless of who or which team kicked it out. If you got to the ball first, it was yours. Interestingly, neither tripping nor hacking was allowed, and no player should use his hands to hold or push his adversary. Meaning that basically you were not allowed to make any tackles or use your hands to protect yourself or the ball. But honestly, my favorite rule from the OG law book is the definition of the goals. The goals had two upright posts, 8 yards apart, without any tape or bar across them. Yep, that's right. There was no crossbar, which basically meant that you could score at any height, as long as the ball went through the goalposts that were, again, 8 feet or around 2.4 meters apart, which made the goal a lot more narrow than the 21st century full-size goal we all know. But just imagine the modern game without the crossbar. What would it do to the tactics? And what about every YouTuber's favorite challenge, the crossbar challenge? Anyways, only 3 years later, in 1866, a tape was added between the goalposts. In 1875, it was announced that the crossbar could be marked either with tape or an actual crossbar. And finally, in 1883, it was required to have an actual crossbar between the goalposts. So the madness didn't actually go on for too long. Also, in 1863, all players were allowed to catch the ball with their hands, as long as they didn't run with it or throw the ball after the catch. A so-called fair catch was rewarded with a free kick, meaning that basically you could catch a pass with your hands, place the ball down, and continue the game with a free kick. Now, this rule didn't live too long either, and in 1870 all handling of the ball became forbidden. All of it. Which makes you wonder, what about the goalkeepers? Well, funnily enough, in the original laws of football, there was absolutely no mention of goalkeepers. But in 1871, a year after all handling of the ball became forbidden, as we just spoke about, the goalkeeper was introduced as a player who was allowed to handle the ball for the protection of his goal in any area of the pitch. Another crazy law from the OG rulebook was the fact that you could only pass the ball backwards. Back then, any player ahead of the kicker was in an offside position. So in simple language, you could only pass the ball backwards. Otherwise, your teammate was offside. However, 3 years later, the offside rule was modified for the first time, and the player was onside as long as there were 3 opponents between the player and the opposing goal. And since then, the offside has kept evolving, but to this day, it still remains as one of the biggest talking points of the game. Now, funnily enough, the 1863 rules mention nothing about the length of the match or the number of players on the pitch. And there were no actual punishments for breaking the rules. And it was first in 1874 that the umpire was introduced. The umpire was basically the first referee, as believe it or not, for the first 11 years, team captains were generally expected to make sure all rules were being followed. Just take a moment to try and imagine Messi and Ramos refereeing the game together in the middle of El Clasico. Now that would be something else. So as a little summary, in 1863, when the first laws of football were published, the pitch was, well, quite unique. The goals were super narrow and had no crossbar. You couldn't tackle, you couldn't pass the ball forward, but you could catch the ball with your hands. There was no mention of the length of the match or the number of players on the pitch, and the first game ever that was played under the OG rules was a goalless 0-0 draw between Barnes and Richmond. No goals whatsoever. Anyways, as mentioned, these were some of the crazy rules from way back in the days. Not all of them. And in the nearly 160 years, football has evolved a lot. So next time a new rule gets added to the law book, don't be mad and just remember that it's been happening forever. And with those words, if you enjoyed the episode, be sure to smash the like button as it makes us really happy. And if you want to see more similar stuff right away, check out the top 10 list of modern rules you didn't know existed by clicking the thumbnail on the bottom left corner of your screen. That's it for today. I'm out.